World War II submarine that went down in battle, the American families back here at home with so many questions, what a team of explorers just found.
For more than 70 years, the ocean concealed a terrifying secret in the dark silence of its depths. A missing World War II submarine, swallowed by the waves without a trace, has finally been located. And what was found inside has left even hardened experts speechless. When divers and researchers explored the wreck, they weren't greeted by rusted machinery or empty steel corridors, but by a frozen nightmare, a haunting tableau preserved beneath the sea. What they uncovered was so disturbing that it challenged belief and reopened one of the darkest chapters of the war. Could this wreck hold the untold truth about the fate of 80 men who vanished without a word? Let's dive into the extraordinary story of the USS Grayback, its wartime service, its tragic final mission, and the chilling discovery that finally brought its tale to light: the long search for the USS Grayback. In June 2019, after decades of failed expeditions and lingering questions, a breakthrough finally came. The research vessel RV Petrel, guided by underwater explorer Tim Taylor and his team, moved cautiously across the East China Sea. Taylor was no stranger to this kind of mission. Through his Lost 52 project, he had dedicated much of his life to finding American submarines that had disappeared during World War II. But one case had haunted families and historians alike for 3/4 of a century: the fate of the USS Grayback SS-208. Since February 1944, the submarine had been listed as missing in action with all 80 crew members. Families had lived in grief without closure, clinging to fading hope or struggling with unanswered questions. Now, armed with new technology and a rediscovered clue from wartime Japanese archives, Taylor and his team were about to solve the mystery that had eluded generations. Construction of the Grayback. The USS Grayback was not just another submarine. She belonged to the Tambor class, a line of 12 boats that represented the cutting edge of U.S. naval engineering at the time. Her keel was laid down on April 3, 1940, at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. Measuring 307 feet long, with a displacement of nearly 2,400 tons when submerged, the Grayback was designed for long-range patrols across the Pacific. She was launched on January 31, 1941, and formally commissioned into the U.S. Navy that June under the command of Lieutenant Willard A. Saunders. In the months before Pearl Harbor, her crew trained relentlessly, conducting shakedown cruises and perfecting the skills they would soon need in wartime. None of them could have predicted how quickly they would be called into action. When Japan struck Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the United States was plunged into war, and the Grayback was dispatched to the Pacific. From February 1942 onward, she joined the fight, striking Japanese shipping, sinking supply vessels, and harassing enemy convoys. Time and again, the submarine proved her worth, building a reputation as one of the most effective and daring boats in the fleet. A record of valor. Across 9 war patrols, the Grayback and her crew distinguished themselves. Armed with 10 torpedo tubes, 6 in the bow and 4 in the stern, plus a deck gun and later anti-aircraft weapons, she became a fearsome predator beneath the waves. Her diesel-electric engines gave her speed on the surface and stealth below. Her crew endured exhausting conditions, stifling heat, foul air, and constant danger, but their skill and courage made them a formidable enemy. By early 1944, the submarine had sunk 14 enemy vessels totaling over 63,000 tons, crippling Japan's ability to move supplies and troops. For the Allies, every success was a victory, not just of numbers, but of morale. Submarines like the Grayback were silent hunters, undermining Japan's war machine in ways that aircraft and surface ships could not. The final patrol. The Grayback's 10th patrol began on January 28, 1944, when she departed Pearl Harbor for the East China Sea. Her mission: to continue strangling Japanese supply lines. In late February, the submarine reported back with good news. On the 24th, she confirmed the sinking of 2 cargo ships. The very next day, she announced the destruction of a tanker and damage to a troop transport. But after February 25th, the radio fell silent. The silence stretched for weeks. By March 30th, 1944, when the submarine failed to return to her rendezvous, the Navy reluctantly declared her lost with all hands. 80 men, sons, husbands, fathers, vanished without explanation. For their families, the news was devastating. Grief mixed with the faint hope that perhaps survivors might surface someday, but as the years passed, that hope dwindled. A deadly clerical error. Why did it take 75 years to find the submarine? The answer lay in a single error buried deep in wartime records. Japanese war diaries recorded the sinking of an American submarine, but when the data was translated decades later, a single digit in the latitude and longitude was transcribed incorrectly. This mistake shifted the search area by nearly 100 miles. For years, researchers searched the wrong waters. It wasn't until 2018 that a Japanese researcher revisiting the original records discovered the error. That revelation gave Taylor and his team the final piece of the puzzle. Armed with corrected coordinates, they sailed into the East China Sea in 2019 with renewed determination. The wreck revealed. At last, sonar scans detected the shape of a submarine resting 1,427 feet below the surface. Cameras confirmed the find, the USS Grayback. The wreck was hauntingly well preserved, but the cause of her loss was clear. A massive hole near the conning tower showed where an aerial bomb had struck, likely while the submarine was surfaced to recharge batteries. The blast tore open the pressure hull, leaving the crew no chance of survival. As remotely operated vehicles drifted through the corridors, an even more chilling sight emerged: the skeletal remains of the crew. Some were still at their stations, faithful to duty until the end. Others clustered near escape hatches, desperate for a way out in their final moments. Even seasoned experts, hardened by years of wreck dives, were shaken. This was no longer just a historical relic. It was a tomb. The 80 men of the Grayback were still aboard, their sacrifice frozen in silence. Families find closure. News of the discovery rippled across the United States. For the families of the lost crew, it was both heartbreaking and healing. After 75 years, they finally had answers. Some described it as closure. Others said it reopened old wounds. One niece of a lost sailor said her uncle had always been a figure of family legend, larger than life, but his absence had left a permanent hole. Knowing what had happened brought both sorrow and relief. The U.S. Navy confirmed the find and held a solemn ceremony above the wreck site. Families gathered aboard ships, wreaths were laid upon the waves, and the mournful sound of taps drifted across the sea. For many, it was the first time they could truly say goodbye. Plans were also announced for a permanent exhibit at the Navy's National Museum in Washington, D.C., ensuring that future generations would learn the story of the Grayback and her crew. Submarines in World War II. The story of the Grayback is not just the story of one submarine, but of an entire branch of naval warfare that changed the course of history. During World War II, submarines became some of the most feared weapons in the oceans. Germany's U-boats terrorized the Atlantic, sinking merchant ships in an attempt to starve Britain into submission. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, American submarines struck relentlessly at Japanese shipping. By the end of the war, U.S. submarines had sunk over half of Japan's merchant fleet, crippling its ability to sustain the war effort. These missions were incredibly dangerous. Submarines operated in silence, relying on stealth, but once detected, they faced depth charges, sonar sweeps, and air patrols. Life on board was claustrophobic and perilous. One direct hit often meant the loss of the entire crew. Yet despite the risks, submarine crews pressed on, knowing their work was vital to victory. Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 Project. The rediscovery of the Grayback was part of Tim Taylor's Lost 52 project, an ambitious effort to locate all 52 U.S. submarines lost during World War II. Each represents not only a feat of wartime engineering, but also a mass grave for the men who served aboard. Taylor uses state-of-the-art technology, including underwater drones and 3D mapping, to locate and document these wrecks. But for him, it is not simply about exploration. It is about honoring sacrifice. Every wreck is treated as a war grave. The team does not disturb the site, but instead creates detailed visual records so families and the public can see the submarines without desecrating them. For the families, these discoveries are deeply personal. They provide long-awaited closure, sometimes decades after the loss. For history, they preserve the memory of young men who never came home, ensuring their bravery is not forgotten. Remembering the Grayback. The discovery of the Grayback is both a technical triumph and a sobering reminder of the cost of war. Her service history showcases the power and importance of submarines in the Pacific theater, but her fate underscores the risks faced by those who fought beneath the waves. Monuments, museums, and ceremonies now honor the 80 men who gave their lives aboard her. Their story is taught to new generations, not as a relic of the past, but as a living lesson about sacrifice, courage, and the human cost of freedom. The ocean may have kept it secret for 75 years, but now the story of the Grayback and her crew has been reclaimed from silence. Final thoughts. The horrific discovery inside the USS Grayback was not just the sight of skeletal remains or twisted steel. It was the confrontation with a moment frozen in time. The lives of 80 men cut short in an instant, their struggle preserved in the depths. Their story is not one of defeat, but of valor. The Grayback served with distinction, struck hard at the enemy, and carried out her duty until the very end. Today, she rests in silence, no longer lost, her crew honored as heroes. What do you think of the haunting story of the Grayback? Does it change how you view the human cost of war? Share your thoughts below, and remember to honor the memory of those who gave everything beneath the sea.